picture yourself standing on the edge of the ocean on a day when the weather is just, incredibly violent.
Oh, yeah, like those days where the wind is howling and the waves are just crashing everywhere.
Exactly. Or, alternatively, imagine you're standing out in the middle of the desert at midnight. You look up and it's a perfectly clear night sky, completely untouched by city lights.
Just absolute darkness and stars.
Right. And in both of those scenarios, there is this very specific, sudden feeling that hits you. It's that visceral, overwhelming realization of being completely and utterly tiny.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's like existential vertigo.
Yes, existential vertigo. You realize you are just a speck, like a rounding error in a massive, incomprehensible universe.
And, you confront the sheer scale of the cosmos, or just the raw physical power of nature, and suddenly your daily realities, your job, your ambitions, your individual identity, they suddenly feel mathematically insignificant.
Totally. And there is a strange beauty to that realization, right? A real sense of awe.
There is. But that awe usually comes with a shadow. It can be intensely paralyzing for a lot of people.
Because if you're operating on a scale that small, the logical brain immediately asks, what meaningful impact would you possibly have on the world?
Right. How could you possibly matter?
Well, that paralyzing sensation and exactly how to systematically dismantle it is the entire foundation of our deep dive today.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. We're exploring a really fascinating translated text today. It's called Sé un héroe, descifra tu grandeza, which translates to be a hero, decode your greatness.
It's a fantastic read.
It really is. And specifically, we are unpacking a section of the material devoted to what the book calls Principle V, or the fifth principle of the hero.
Right. And the core of this fifth principle revolves around a philosophy that they call the power of one.
The power of one.
Exactly. And it is a direct assault on that exact feeling of existential insignificance we were just talking about.
Because think about the narrative we're fed every single day, right? The world constantly broadcasts this relentless message that to trigger change, you need immense scale.
Oh, absolutely. You need massive venture capital or, millions of social media followers.
Right. You need a giant institutional platform just to even move the needle. But this philosophy we're looking at today, it flips that entirely.
It completely flips the script.
Yeah.
It builds a case that true invincibility and the kind of epic impact that actually reshapes reality, it doesn't start with a giant crowd or a massive stockpile of resources.
Nope.
It originates in the absolute smallest unit possible, which is, you.
You. Just one person. But to really grasp how a single person holds that kind of weight, we first have to look at how the universe itself defines the concept of one.
Yeah, and the text does this in such a brilliant way. It draws our attention to the absolute largest structures we can observe, and then it just zooms all the way in on the microscopic.
Right, like the Milky Way. You look at an image of our galaxy, and your brain processes it as a single massive entity, this giant swirling disk of cosmic light.
But a galaxy isn't a single object at all. It is a system composed of millions upon millions of individual solitary stars.
And we see that exact same structural reality closer to home, too, like the ocean. We perceive an ocean as a unified body of immense, unstoppable force.
Or a cyclone, right. We view it as a singular, catastrophic event.
Exactly. But if you pull out a microscope, what are you actually looking at? You're looking at billions upon billions of tiny individual drops of water.
So the macro-level event that we are so intimidated by is entirely 100% dependent on the micro-level units that we usually just ignore.
And there is a wildly specific statistic presented in the book to illustrate the scale, and I love this. It blew my mind.
Oh, the weight of the water drop.
Yes. So a single drop of water weighs merely 0.05 grams.
Which is almost nothing.
Right. To put that physical reality into perspective for you, that single drop is 20 times lighter than a tiny ant. Yes. An insect we walk past on the sidewalk without a second thought is literally a giant compared to the foundational building block of a hurricane.
It forces you to confront the physical absurdity of massive power. The elements that carve canyons and sink giant ships are individually practically weightless.
Okay, but let's unpack this for a second, because I feel like I see a potential trap here for the reader.
Okay, what kind of trap?
Well, if the goal is to realize my own potential, right, telling me that my cosmic equivalent is a literal drop of water, something 20 times lighter than an ant, it feels like it could backfire.
Like it makes you feel even smaller.
Exactly. Doesn't this analogy actually cement the idea that the individual is incredibly weak? Like, if I am the drop, I have zero power on my own. Only the massive ocean matters.
That is such a natural instinct when we look at scale. We constantly equate size with inherent value.
Right. Big equals strong. Small equals weak.
Exactly. But a closer read of the material here reveals a critical distinction between being weak and being foundational.
Foundational,
Yeah.
Okay.
The text explicitly states that the inherent power of each individual star is what makes the union of a galaxy possible in the first place.
Oh, I see.
The universe is teaching us that greatness comes from the unity of a few, which then defines the strength of the many.
So wait, the ocean isn't granting power to the drop is bringing its power to the ocean.
That is the fundamental mechanism. Those pure, innocent, 0.05-gram elements are exactly what constitute the most unstoppable force on the planet.
That is such a huge shift in perspective.
Right, because a tidal wave that shatters concrete isn't some separate, magical entity imposing its will on the water. The wave is the water.
Wow.
The individual drop isn't weak at all. It is holding the latent, inherent power required to build the macro structure. Without the one, the many physically cannot exist.
Okay, so if we accept that the one has this inherent foundational power, how does it move from being a static building block to actually doing something?
What do you mean?
Well, we're talking about galaxies and oceans, which are somewhat static structures in our minds. How does a single unit trigger a dynamic, real-world event?
Ah, right. We have to shift from looking at structures to looking at reactions.
Reactions.
Yeah, the cosmos operates on a really specific rule here. The entire universe is governed by the combination of small numbers, and the number one is the universal catalyst.
The catalyst.
Exactly. It is the most powerful required starting point to initiate any dynamic event.
And the rapid-fire examples the book uses to illustrate this are just incredibly vivid. Like, It only takes one single note to break silence and begin a symphony.
Or biology. A single embryo reproduces over 9 months, dividing continuously to become a newborn made of exactly 26 billion cells.
We go from one single cell to 26 billion.
And dividing a single atom produces a massive nuclear reaction. Notice the efficiency of that scaling, right? The universe doesn't demand 1,000 atoms to start a chain reaction.
It only needs one.
Right. It doesn't need 50 embryos to build a human. It requires one.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of watching those massive, intricate domino setups on video.
Oh, yeah. Where they have thousands of pieces arranged in a giant gymnasium.
Exactly. But that first piece, the master domino, isn't just sitting there passively at the bottom of a pile waiting to be part of the structure. It is the active catalyst.
It holds the kinetic potential.
Yes. And once it's tipped, it violently initiates this huge chain reaction that results in a massive, sprawling 26 billion piece masterpiece. It's a completely active agent.
The master domino is a perfect way to visualize the kinetic energy of one. And what's really interesting is that the text applies this exact catalyst concept directly to your identity.
To who we are.
Exactly. It makes this jarring claim regarding who you are right now.
Yeah.
Basically, it says your current status, your past failures, your current limitations, they hold very little importance.
Which is hard to swallow sometimes.
Oh, very hard. But the book argues that what actually matters is who you desire to become. The author describes this as putting on the armor of a legend in the making.
Wearing the armor of a legend in the making. That implies that greatness isn't some inherent trait you are just magically born with. It is a deliberate choice. You have to actively put it on.
Right. You have to choose it.
And a massive part of putting on that armor, according to the book, involves actively shedding the societal labels that try to define your shape.
The demographic labels.
Yes. The source material takes a very, very hard stance against demographics. It urges you to completely reject classification by generational buckets. You know, Gen X, Gen W, Gen Z, millennials.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the psychological mechanism of a generational label. It is designed by marketers and sociologists to group millions of distinct individuals into a single predictable average.
It's literally putting you in a box.
It dictates how you supposedly think, what media you consume, how you manage your money, and what your values are, based entirely on the random year you happen to be born.
Which completely dilutes the power of one. By forcing you into the average of many, it tells you that you aren't the master domino.
You're just another piece.
Right. You are just one of a million identical plastic pieces in a cardboard box. And you are expected to behave exactly like the rest of the pieces in your specific box.
And by accepting that demographic label, you surrender your position as a catalyst. The author is fiercely demanding that you not let a societal denominator diminish your value.
You have to take control.
Exactly. You must take control of your own generational history. You don't inherit Gen Z's history or Gen X's history. You write your own, starting with your own right now.
The mandate is so clear, you count as one. Never, never, never underestimate your power.
Never.
So, okay, the individual is a powerful, necessary catalyst. The obvious question now is how we actually harness this in a practical sense. Like, how do you or I operate daily with this mindset?
Well, the material returns to the metaphor of the tiny water drop to explain the behavioral psychology needed to pull this off.
Right. We are asked to observe the physical properties of water and literally map them onto our own psychology.
Because water is arguably the most resilient substance on Earth. Not because it is hard, but because it doesn't fight its environment.
It is entirely adaptable. If you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You pour it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot.
You like water, right?
Exactly. The material suggests you must develop that same radical flexibility. Keep an open mind, Take whatever shape is required by your current challenge, change your approach when you hit a barrier.
You slowly erode the obstacles rather than shattering yourself against them.
That adaptability is just the baseline, because the text pushes the metaphor even further. It goes into a literal phase change.
This part is fascinating.
It is. It introduces this highly poetic, almost mystical mechanism for achieving a higher state of success and true meaning.
The evaporation.
Right. It states that you have to closely examine your current, deeply held beliefs. And to reach that higher state, many of those old myths must evaporate and ascend like water.
Now here's where it gets really interesting, because when you try to visualize that mechanism, a lot of people hit a mental roadblock.
I definitely did. Because when water evaporates, say, a puddle on a hot sidewalk, it vanishes, right? It just disappears into thin air.
Right.
So is the book telling us that to truly embrace our greatness, we have to completely erase our pasts and totally lose our identities?
No, not at all. And to understand the metaphor, we have to look at the actual physics of evaporation, not just the visual illusion of it disappearing.
Okay, break that down for me.
Evaporation is not erasure. It is transformation. Think about liquid water. It is dense, it's heavy, and it is bound by gravity to a specific container, much like our limiting beliefs.
Oh, like the things we tell ourselves, I'm not educated enough, or I'm too old to pivot careers.
Exactly. I'm just an average employee. These are the heavy, liquid myths keeping you stuck in the puddle.
So evaporating a myth doesn't mean forgetting your age or where you came from. It means transforming that dense, heavy excuse into a lighter, kinetic perspective.
Yes.
Like saying, my years of experience actually give me a unique advantage. You weren't disappearing. You were literally becoming lighter and expanding.
You ascend to a higher level. The water molecules are still water. They are still fundamentally you. But they are no longer restricted by the puddle on the ground.
That makes so much sense.
By letting go of old myths, you elevate your mindset while remaining totally grounded in your core identity. You just operate at a much higher altitude of thinking.
But wait, a single evaporated drop of water floating alone as invisible vapor up in the sky doesn't really accomplish much on its own, does it?
Well, no.
Like, you've elevated your mindset, you've realized your individual power as a catalyst, but what is the next step in the sequence? Where does this go?
The next step is synergy. You cannot remain an isolated vapor. And the text brings in this beautiful quote from the Japanese writer Ryunosuke Satoru to outline this exact transition.
What's the quote?
He says, individually we are one drop, together we are an ocean.
Ah, individually a drop, together an ocean. So the ultimate goal of realizing your individual power isn't just to build a monument to yourself.
No, not at all.
It is to combine that power with others who have also elevated their mindsets. The material talks about creating solid synergy alongside a specific community, what it calls the BEA hero community.
And this community is described less like a traditional networking group and much more like a living, breathing organism.
Yeah, it's not just a Facebook group.
Right. It is an environment that actively ignites your feelings and your values. It acts as a collective heartbeat for individuals who are in the process of training themselves to be these catalysts. You are the next hero in training.
And the resulting synergy of that group is compared to a cyclone. It awakens your passions, it demands more creation from you, and it amplifies what the text so beautifully refers to as your roaring voice.
Roaring voice.
Yes, and that imagery perfectly connects the micro back to the macro, because one drop makes a barely audible splash, right?
Oh, wait.
But millions of drops swirling together with this elevated kinetic energy produce a roaring voice that absolutely cannot be ignored.
It's incredible imagery. But within this imagery of roaring cyclones and unstoppable oceans, the text inserts a really vital grounding warning.
The humility aspect.
Yes, when you step into your power, when you evaporate those old myths and you join a community that amplifies your voice, your ego becomes a massive liability.
Oh, for sure.
The instruction is clear. You are becoming an invincible spirit, an extraordinary human being, but you must fiercely protect your humility.
Keep your feet on the ground while you reach for the stars. That's the exact balance. You need the upward, ascending ambition of the evaporated water, but you also need the grounded reality of the earth.
Exactly. Because if you spend all your time just floating up in the clouds, you completely lose your ability to impact the physical world.
And it is that tension, the tension between the ambition and the humility, that actually makes the impact possible.
Right.
And this tension brings us to the ultimate secret of the fifth principle, which the book reveals through this very specific, striking graphic in the source material.
The skydiver.
Yes. It depicts a skydiver in free fall. They are high above the earth, completely free in the clouds, but superimposed over this skydiver is an arrow pointing directly to an icon of the human brain.
And right next to this is the BEA hero code.
Exactly. And the code asks the reader a very direct question. What makes you invincible?
And the answer provided by the code is my passion.
Which is such a fascinating juxtaposition. What's so interesting here is that we're given the word passion, a concept we almost exclusively associate with raw, unbridled emotion.
Right, the heart, the chest, feelings.
But the arrow points explicitly to the brain.
It is demanding that we redefine what passion actually is. Because if passion is just pure emotion, yelling, crying, getting intensely excited about a new project for like 3 days and then abandoning it, that isn't invincibility.
No, it's just noise.
Exactly. By pointing to the brain, the text argues that true invincibility requires the intellect to direct the emotion.
The intellect serves as the lens. It focuses that raw, wild energy of passion into a laser.
Intense desire is the fuel, but deliberate, mindful execution is the engine.
I love that. Fuel and engine.
That combination of intellectual rigor and deep emotional drive is the exact mechanism that turns a 0.05-gram drop of water into an unstoppable force.
So looking back at the territory we've covered in this deep dive today, the shifting perspective is just profound. We began with that paralyzing feeling of staring at the night sky, feeling like a totally insignificant speck.
And the fifth principle dismantled that by showing us that a 0.05-gram drop of water isn't a symbol of weakness at all. It is the physical requirement for an ocean's existence.
Right. We examined the universe's reliance on the number one as the catalyst for dynamic change, the single note for the symphony, the master domino for the chain reaction.
We discussed the psychological necessity of rejecting generational labels and average demographics so you can reclaim your individual history.
We learned how to apply the physics of water to our own minds, remaining radically adaptable and intentionally evaporating heavy, limiting myths so our mindset can ascend to a higher altitude.
And finally, we saw that invincibility isn't solitary. It requires combining that elevated mindset with a community to create a cyclone, driven by a passion that is strictly guided by the intellect.
It really is a complete operational blueprint. It takes you from a state of existential paralysis all the way to a state of highly focused collective momentum.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. And the material leaves the reader with an urgent push. It quotes an unknown author, cutting through all the theory and theory crafting to ask two very sharp questions. If not now, when? If not you, who?
It strips away the luxury of waiting. It places the capability and therefore the responsibility entirely on your shoulders.
It demands immediate action.
Yeah.
So as we close out today's deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that merges the physics and the psychology we've been discussing.
Right.
We talked about how limiting beliefs must evaporate so your mindset can elevate. And we just established that passion directed by the brain is the core of your invincibility.
Well, recall the actual physics of a phase change. A puddle of heavy, dense water does not spontaneously evaporate.
No, it doesn't.
It requires a significant input of energy. The molecular bonds only break when exposed to intense, sustained heat.
So what if the passion the text is talking about is literally the heat source?
Oh, wow.
Right. Without intense heat, your old myths, your excuses, your societal labels, they remain heavy, dense, and stuck to the ground. They will never evaporate on their own.
The energy required to break those psychological bonds has to come from somewhere.
Exactly. So the next time you feel like a tiny, insignificant speck in a massive universe, ask yourself this. What is a specific passion in your life right now that burns hot enough to evaporate your oldest, most stubborn doubts?